Today, I'm joined by Anna Baker, Australia's top baby sleep training expert. Having worked with celebrities like Crowe and Camilla, as well as Australia's top CEOs over the past 20 years. If you're a new parent or have a family member expecting, this episode is for you. From the sleep training process to common mistakes to avoid and tips for parents struggling with sleep deprivation, Anna has all of the advice to help both you and your baby sleep as well as possible. Anna's experience led to her founding Dream with Baker, an innovative clothing line allowing nappy changing without waking the baby, and Sleep Baker newborn sleep consultation services. Listen closely throughout this episode for some special discount codes for All About You listeners. Let's get into it. Anna, thank you so much for coming to be on the podcast today. Welcome to All About You. How did you come to be interested in all things sleeping and babies?
It's quite a fun story. So I used to live in Washington State in the US, and I was working for some doctors as a nanny and going to school. I actually wanted to become a doctor. And I remember it was around Christmas time, and as you have Christmas parties, a few of the doctors went to a Christmas party and said, "Oh, Russell Crowe's looking for an elite nanny." And I thought it was a joke. And it happened so quickly that the next day I received this call saying, "Look, he really wants to interview you." And it was like 1, 2, 3, boom. The next thing I know, I was on a flight going to LA for the interview. And still, it didn't hit me until after I moved to LA that, okay, wow, I'm definitely a full-time elite nanny now. So,
wow. And so did you give up your studies then?
I did. I thought I would try to do them online. That was really hard. I'm kind of a person that you have to be in it to win it, right?
Yes,
I just couldn't do things online. Yeah. So I took some time off, moved to Australia, and one thing led to another, and here I am today, like 15 years later.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so in those 15 years, you've obviously looked after lots of babies and lots of children. What are we all doing wrong? I've got 4 children. Most of mine are well past the waking me up at night phase, but it's really hard being a mum and working. What do you think that we're doing?
Am I allowed to say that I think that we all kind of overthink the process, right? I think that we have this idea of that we all want sleep, right? And then we hear from other people, whether it's social media, our mother's group, or just people in general, and you're supposed to be following that same path. But not all babies are the same, right? Not, some babies have reflux, some babies just don't sleep. And you do get to the point where you want to be like everyone else, right? So I think we're all really hard on ourselves. And I have a lot of parents that will come to me saying, "Oh my gosh, I tried 20 different methods and not one of them are working." And so when I say to them, "Well, how long did you try for?" Like 20, 30 minutes. And then I gave up because I'm too sleep deprived and I'm tired, right? So I do think we overthink the process. I want to keep things so simple. And simple is that's not the right word to use, but I want to keep it practical, where if I tell you something, you're more likely to stick to it because it's going to be easier than doing 25 different things. I don't want you to read an essay on what to do. I want to be able to tell you, then you go home like, "Oh, well, Sleep Baker told me this, tried it and it worked." That's what I want, practical parenting.
So basically what you're saying is that we're all we've got analysis paralysis. We're all reading too many different ideas and then we're trying to do too many things at once, instead of just maybe picking something simple and trying to put that in place. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. And I think we also forget that a baby is going to act like a baby, right? You can't expect a method to work in 20 minutes and then for them to understand it the next day, right? These are methods that you're going to put into place, whatever one you decide to use, and you're going to practice. You could practice 3 days and it works. On the 4th day, it doesn't work, but on the 5th day, you still practice the same method. And it is going to be a roller coaster, right? Just like a roller coaster of emotions, it's going to be a roller coaster of methods, but using the one that works for you. So I have one parent that will say to me recently, "Oh, look, I used, the Sleep Baker method for about 3 weeks. It worked great. It didn't work. So then I've tried this." And I was like, "Well, how's that going now?" And she's like, "Well, I've reverted back to the old way. So I think I need you back again." Right? So it's giving parents confidence that even though you're on your roller coaster and maybe on day 5 it doesn't work, keep doing the same one and just keep practicing it.
I mean, I think the thing about mums is that we often feel a lot of guilt and shame about things. And I think people can feel if they meet up with other mums or they're in a mums group and everyone else seems to have a baby who's feeding beautifully and putting on weight and sleeping, you can kind of take it as a little bit of a sense of failure if your baby is that baby that you're pacing the floor with at night. And is it fair to say that just some babies are trickier than others and some babies are just dream sleepers and some aren't?
Absolutely. But I also think it's sometimes, new parent syndrome, right? I went to a mother's group probably a couple years ago, and this one lady there was super confident, was, saying her baby was sleeping really, really well at night. And then as soon as the mother group left, she pulled me aside and goes, "When can you come to my house?" So, her baby might have been sleeping great at night and she was getting the sleep. But then during the day, she was suffering from anxiety because she wasn't day sleeping. She was fighting with her husband. Her other two children were, running amuckus. And so it is one of those things that everybody does have issues, whether it's sleeping during the day or sleeping at night.
So let's just take a step back. How much is a baby supposed to sleep? Like, let's think of, in the first 6 weeks of life. Like, how much are they supposed to be sleeping? Is there a sort of a set rule, or how many hours?
Look, that's a really good question, because a lot of my families will message me saying, "Okay, I've been home from the hospital. Let's get into the routine," right? And I was like, "Ooh, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself," right? Because if you have a baby that wakes up at 5:30 a.m. for a feed, chances are in the next 45 minutes to an hour and a half, they're going to go back to sleep, right? For the first 8 weeks, enjoy the newborn stage, right? And also focus on your body as well. Because if you were trying to get your baby in a routine of, waking up and putting them to sleep and waking up, it's exhausting, right? Your main goal is having them latch on if you're breastfeeding, having them take a bottle if they're on formula, for whatever reason. So you, as much as I say, stick to a routine if possible, very simple. Try a 6 a.m. feed, try a 10 a.m. feed, a 2 p.m. feed, a 6 a.m. feed. If you are hitting those milestones with feed, chances are in between that time, they are going to sleep. So I found that with my children, when you first come home from hospital, it's the best time because they're sleeping. So when your family wants to come over and you want to have them over, absolutely. Have them fold some laundry, have them make you a cup of tea, or encourage you to have a shower, right? Don't try to follow a schedule. If families want to hold the kids, let them hold the babies. Let them enjoy that time. I always say from 0 to 8 weeks, enjoy the time of having a newborn.
And then after that, one of the other things that I see parents worry about is having, following the natural rhythm of the baby when the baby wants to feed, as opposed to being sort of very, sort of regimented in when you feed. Like, are those two things in conflict?
That could be real controversial, right? Because I do have some parents, and again, it's moms that have, they read everything before they've given birth, and they get home, they're like, "Man, I've read everything, but what did I actually read?" This is where they need the help, they need the confidence. But sometimes when you get on a schedule, if you know that you're going to be aiming at 6 o'clock and it's 5:30, and then you do a 6 o'clock feed, well, you know that, okay, I'm going to settle my baby back to sleep if they wake up an hour and a half later, right? Because it's too soon for a feed if they've had a full feed. So I think giving yourself a time to kind of aim for, then you kind of know if you are going to go through a period of, let's say, cluster feeding, because that is normal for a baby. You go through these stages of all you feel like you're doing is eating and feeding your baby and trying to get some sleep. They say sleep when the baby sleeps, almost nearly impossible, right? You're a mom of 4. How did you go with that? Did you just fall asleep when your baby slept?
No, sadly not.
So I always say, look, just be practical. Try to find a time where you're going between 2 and 4 hours. If you are feeding every 20 minutes, maybe your baby's not getting enough food. If you're finding that your baby is whinging all the time, maybe they're getting too much food, or maybe you have, the fun stages of reflux. So I love the fact that when something doesn't seem right, that's when parents reach out.
And so just to explain, what is cluster feeding?
Cluster feeding is when you feel like there's no end to the feed. You feed, they sleep for 20 minutes, they're back up again, they're feeding on both sides. And look, I get parents that will start saying to me, "Look, do you think that I should, do formula?" Well, look, feeding is best, right? But if you are breastfeeding, you do go through the stage of a baby constantly feeling like that never ending of feeding.
And this might be a controversial question, but lots of people will say that they think that bottle-fed babies sleep better than breastfed babies. You've obviously nannied for lots of people at this stage. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I do get a lot of parents that will say to me, "Okay, do you think I should breastfeed or I should just go straight to formula?" And, as a first-time parent, you do what you want to do. I'm going to be there to support you because a fed baby is a happy baby. But look, I've got some parents that I was a mama too. I couldn't make anything I had to put my kids on formula, but how much easier would it be to be at a shopping center just to whip it out and, start rather than running to the cafe, getting some warm water, shaking the bottle. So look, no, I think if you're feeding your baby enough and you're making enough milk, you don't need to revert to formula.
Okay. And you don't particularly see any differences in sleep patterns between bottle fed and formula fed?
Oh, look, there are some parents that swear by the fact that they'll do a 10 p.m. dream feed with formula. But then sometimes when I'm there at night, if I give them a 10 p.m. dream of formula, they're still up at 12. They're not going to 2 o'clock, right? So it's these habits that babies are waking up and you have to help them connect their sleep cycles and go back to sleep.
So what is the sleep baker method? Talk us through it.
Well, sleep baker is all the ingredients for a good night's sleep. Look, these methods that are around are nothing that I've developed, right? Somebody once said to me, you should write a book, Anna. But I realized after all these years of what I do, people want answers now. They don't want to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning reading a book. Okay, like Sleep Baker says to do this, right? They want a solution yesterday. And I guess I've mastered them because I'm really good at them. And it's about giving parents confidence, right? If I say to you, look, you're going to go home today and you're going to do A, B, C, D with this method. And yep, it's going to be this. It's going to be up and down. It's going to be all around. And you go through and it happens, parents are like, wow, it's exactly what Anna said. You are more likely to stick to that method. So if your baby is a baby that sleeps for 20 minutes and you get your baby up after 20 minutes and you don't try to help them settle, they're not going to be able to connect sleep cycles. And you're going to be pulling out your hair because you're tired and you're limited between 20 and 40 minutes of having that baby sleep. And how else do you get anything else done? Especially if you have 3 other kids at home. So the methods that I have read about, that I have put into place, that I have practiced, have been around for many, many years. But there is a misconception behind any type of sleep training or sleep settling because everyone is so scared of the cried out. But it's not really about that. It's about being there with your child, whether you're picking them up and helping them settle or you're putting them back down. They are going to protest cry because that is their form of communication.
Okay.
Yeah.
So controlled crying, that was definitely a thing when my children were younger. What's your thoughts on that?
If your son or daughter asked for a lollipop at 6 o'clock in the morning or a Snickers bar, would you give it to them?
No.
And what are they going to do when you tell them no?
Cry?
Yeah, they're going to cry, right? I mean, not that I want to compare a piece of chocolate, for a baby not settling, but I guess, I say to parents all the time, well, would you give your 1-year-old a lollipop? They were like, no. But I'm like, well, let's start getting in some really good habits for your child, right? Because when you go through that 4-month regression, if your child has had no form of sleep training or, sleep techniques, they're not going to learn how to connect those sleep cycles. And you are going to have a child that has a regression for weeks, right? And as we all know, the 4-month one is the worst one because they're reaching new milestones, but milestones does mean regressions. So I always say to parents, if you have a baby that's going to cry, don't leave them there for 5 minutes. Give them a minute or two, let them try to settle, go to there and help them through it, whether that's picking them up, giving them some pats and putting them back down. But I've got some parents that will say to me, oh, Anna, you've never seen a baby like this before. And I get to the house, right? And I'm like super excited because I am so motivated when people say to me, this is game on. I'm like, bring it. Like Sleep Baker's here, right? Like I am so ready for this. And then I'll say, okay, how long do you try to let her settle for? Oh, I don't. As soon as she hears her stirring, she picks her up. So of course, when she does start crying, even when the mom is holding her, they're just so flustered and they're not sure what to do. So controlled crying, you're not leaving your newborn baby there for 5 minutes and saying, see you in 5 minutes. It's about, giving 30 seconds to 2 minutes, helping them pat through it. If they still aren't settling, pick them up, put them back down. It's a lot of work, especially because you want the cry to go away so quickly because it escalates. And when it escalates, you instantly think something is wrong with your child, right? So it's human nature. We don't want our baby to cry. But at the same time, I say to parents, let them have a protest cry. Let them start so then you can start these methods, whether it's picking up or putting down or standing over their bassinet and just giving them pats, letting them know that you are there. That's their way. That's their form of communication.
And do you have ideas around like what a baby should sleep in terms of clothing, or should they be in a sleeping bag, or should they have?
Well, I definitely want to speak to you about my range, but when it comes to, like I said, the first 8 to 12 weeks, make your life easy. Get them in something comfortable, get them in something breathable. If they're not rolling, put them in a swaddle. If you can't swaddle a baby, that's fine. There are so many great options of sleeping bags. And I just think very simple. And also white noise is your best friend. Your child isn't going to be 12 sleeping with white noise, right? So if you can have a bit of, if they can hear the white noise and you can actually move around the house. Because the other thing I see a lot is parents will say to me, and I had this beautiful family, they said, "Oh, Anna, I'm so sorry. Don't mind the house. We don't do the dishes after 6 o'clock." I didn't even think of why, right? And the dad said, "Oh, yeah, we just don't want to wake the baby." And they were tiptoeing. I'm like watching her on the monitor because she's showing me the methods that they're doing. They're tiptoeing out of the baby's bedroom. And I was like, "Oh, what's going on?" They're like, "We just don't want to wake her." And I was like, no, make noise. You know, you don't want a baby that you drop something and they instantly startle, right? But white noise helps block that out. It helps them get into the rhythm to going to sleep. It's all about sleep hygiene. Put them in pajamas, put them in a sleeping bag, put the white noise on, dark room. They're going to establish positive sleep hygiene.
Okay, so you're all for the darkening the blinds and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. Look, I'm not saying you have to go there and like buy $300 blackout blinds, right? You know, I always say to my clients, I get some clients that will travel here and they're here for a short stay. I'm like, get some foil, get a sponge, tap it on the window, and you know, you're good to go for a week or two. I mean, I do know that foil can last up to a year on the windows.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty incredible.
So whenever someone like you comes in as a sleep consultant, like how long does that process last? Do you go and sleep at these people's house or what happens?
Oh, I love that question. So I love when somebody calls me up and they're like, "Okay, I've just had a baby," right? Sometimes I always prefer them to call before they've had a baby, but they don't actually know about Sleepbaker, right? So I always say, "Okay, how'd you find about us?" "I was up at, 3 a.m. and my baby's not sleeping." And thank God for Google, right? Because Sleepbaker pops up like fourth on the list. And they basically, a lot of them, I always encourage, I want everyone to be able to financially afford, because I do understand that, going into someone's house can be quite expensive. So we could do an appointment over the phone, we could do an appointment at the clinics. But yes, ultimately my line of work is going into somebody's house. And what that looks like is amazing, because I'm going into someone's house and parents will be like, "Okay, I'm going to walk you through everything." I'm like, no, like high five and off to bed you go. I don't want to see you till morning, right? And it's great because this is what I do. This is my profession. I am really, really good at what I do. And I love when parents say like, "Oh my God, I really wasn't lying. She hasn't slept in weeks." And then she comes here and, you get her to go to sleep in 5 minutes. Well, it's what I do, right? So when a parent sees a baby sleeping, they are more inclined to following my methods. They just get the confidence. They're like, "Oh, actually, I can do this." Or, "Oh, I didn't realize I could swaddle her." And, I had one mom that put on 2 pairs of pajamas, swaddled the baby, and then put her in a sleeping bag. Like, talk about overkill of heat, right? Of course a baby's going to keep waking up. So it's little things like when you go into somebody's house and you see it, I could be like, "Ooh, actually your bassinet doesn't need to have 25 phone books that we haven't used in years stacked up because they've got really bad reflux." A baby can lay flat. It's all about, helping them through reflux when they do have it, keeping them up for 20 minutes, or maybe changing the way that they feed, or don't be bouncing them around. So you're walking into a house and sometimes it's a really quick fix. And sometimes the parents need weeks to catch up on sleep. And so I'm there. And that's the benefit of having a team, because I can't be everywhere.
Let's say you go and you're there for 2 weeks with a family. Do you then go back and do repeat visits?
Yes. Normally when you have a baby, I will see you during milestones. And those milestones mean regressions, right? So those are challenging times. So sometimes a mom comes home from the hospital and I'll be there the first 2 weeks after they deliver, or my other consultants will be there. And then I'm everywhere when the baby hits 4 months, because sometimes you have really good sleepers. And then at 4 months, the parents are like, "Oh my gosh, we've never dealt with this before. What's going on? I was okay." And that's where the most challenging bookings come, because parents just don't, like reality hits them. "Oh my God, I had a baby. They're 4 months and they're not sleeping and they're doing this and they're rolling over." And it's really, really fun, but it's nice when I leave and a parent's like, "I hope I never have to see you again." I'm like, no hard feelings. Like, I understand.
And so tell us what happens at 4 months with the baby.
Look, it's one of those things like your baby starts rolling, right? Most of the time they're out of swaddles by then. They know the difference between night and day. It's a time where you don't have to feed all night long, but parents are still a bit wary about that because they're like, "Well, they're not on solids yet." Absolutely. But that is where you want to do all the methods that you've learned to be able to do a 10 o'clock dream feed and then not another feed till 6 a.m. So sometimes the regression can last a week and sometimes it can last 4 weeks. If you are somebody that's unsure and you keep trying 10 different methods in the middle of the night, it's going to last longer because it's really, really confusing to the baby. But I always say, if you put the work in straight away, it's going to be hard. You'll find that over time, it just gets easier. And I don't want to say it disappears quickly because that is a bit of a myth, but I think you just get the confidence to be like, right, she's going to start, she'll be, my baby's going to start being unsettled. I know what to do now when they start rolling. I mean, I've had parents say like, she's rolling, I have to go get one of those angel mats in case she stops breathing. I'm like, no, if she's rolled on her tummy, that's okay. She's able to, you can't keep rolling her back, or it's like the baby that drops the dummy every 3 minutes and you're running back and forth trying to get the dummy to stay in their mouth. Like it's hard work. It's exhausting. So I think a lot of parents have that breaking point at 4 months, because if I were to look at my marketing of where we spend most of our money, it's always at the 4-month sleep progression. That is our majority of bookings.
Wow. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. You just reminded me, our first 3 children all did have a dummy. And my husband decided with our 4th child that he was sick of getting up at night to put dummies back into people's mouths. So he gave our youngest child his thumb. And that was even...
Wow. How long did that last for?
That was, I think he sucked his thumb till he was about 7. So
Not your husband's thumb.
No, as in, sorry, as in his own thumb. But so that was a mistake. So do you have any specific ideas on using a dummy or a pacifier or?
I love them. I know like a lot of sleep consultants don't like them because they kind of are probably a bit time consuming. But I think about a child who is very colicky or who does suffer from reflux, because that is a lot of my bookings as well, right? And if they're sucking, and it's help bringing down the pain, I'm all for it. Because if you're getting an hour and a half of sleep and you have to go change that dummy like pop it in, that's okay. But if you get to the point where the dummy is dropping out every 2 to 3 minutes, encourage every other time to put that dummy in. Because what it teaches the baby is to suck harder and to hold on to it longer. Because as soon as that dummy drops, if you're putting it in every single time you enter the room every 2 minutes, they just spit it out. So I had one lady say, well, how can a baby do that? Like, look, they're really, really smart. We do not give babies enough credit. So anyway, she was a bit concerned and didn't really believe me. And then I remember getting a message, oh my God, it works. So every other time she went in there, she'd offer the dummy. The next time she'd go in there, she wouldn't offer it. So it was every other time. Then finally, they eventually sucked on it a bit longer. And but then again, you reach a point where between 3 and 6 months, they just can't keep it in and they can't put it in. Right. So some parents will say, okay, when you sleep train, let's get rid of the dummy. Some kids will have them till they're 3. They're not going to go to kindergarten with the dummy. So everyone, each to their own, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Anna, obviously there are definitely sleep consultants and popping up. How do we know that this person is qualified or has the credentials or does that matter?
God, that's actually a really good question. I've never been asked that before. Look, I think you want to be with someone that makes you feel comfortable, right? I always say to some people, because they're like, oh, geez, you're really expensive. Can you guarantee this? And I was like, well, hey, look at my reviews on Google, right? That's a huge platform for parents because when things work, they all write reviews, right? But I guess if you're speaking to somebody and you don't really like either my personality or their personality, find somebody else. Don't think that you're locked into one person. I'm thankful, like I'll say to people, look, shop around. Call somebody, see, like I had one parent that said to me, look, you're really, really expensive. I understand that. She wanted in-home care and it just, anyways, she shopped around and it didn't work. And 3 months later, she called me back. So I love phone calls like that. But I think just find someone that makes you feel comfortable because it's a really, it's a challenging time. You're sad, you're happy, your emotions are all over the place. Someone's coming into your home. You want to find a person that you trust and that you feel comfortable with.
How do you choose your consultants who work for you?
Yeah, so you have to have empathy. And that is part of the biggest thing about having your own business is you've got people with tons of qualifications, right? They've worked for this person, they've worked for that person. But if they don't have empathy, please don't even apply for the job, right? Because that's where my consultants know. So if they do a night job, whether you're a night nanny or you're a consultant, if my night nanny goes to a job at night and they recognize that something is wrong with the mom or the dad, they must let us know. I don't want that mom going down a path that we could have helped her on. And so that's something that I really had to install in my girls, that if you go to work at night and a parent is suffering from depression or she's crying, yes, help her, but then reach out to us because we will send somebody there the next day because it's all about helping them straight away versus I don't want them to go down the path of, it could have been helped. And that's one thing that you can't train that.
Yeah, amazing.
On somebody.
Yeah.
They have, you can tell when you go into an interview and I'll ask questions like, oh, what happens if you see this or this? And those are the things I look for straight away. I don't want somebody to be like, oh my gosh, I went to Bridget's house yesterday and geez, she was a hot mess. Well, there's no empathy there. Bridget's a hot mess because she's got 3 kids. Her husband's gone back to work and her baby isn't feeding. So of course she's sleep deprived. It's like a bulldozer, right? Things just don't align overnight. And I think that's where parents put a lot of pressure on themselves because they want this. I've had a baby, I'm home from hospital, I'm really, really happy. And Bridget from Mother's Group saying her baby's going really well. You put a bunch of pressure on yourself, right?
Absolutely. And we live in a real celebrity culture where actually having babies and children is actually something that's often in magazines. We see, pregnant bodies in magazines and on magazine covers, which is amazing. But I think all of that is always, there's some subliminal pressure as well as, well, look at Kim Kardashian, all her kids look amazing and they're always spotlessly clean. And I think, a lot of that celebrity era that we're in puts pressure on. But I know that you've worked with celebrities, but I'm assuming they have the same dramas that the rest of us have.
Oh, absolutely. A baby doesn't care your postcode or your financials, right? They want the same thing and they want sleep. And if your baby isn't sleeping, well, that means that you are not sleeping. And again, I'm assuming, because I've been working in this world for years, that a lot of these people also have help, whether they want to say it or not. And I am really lucky because the clients that have used me have no problem saying, oh my gosh, your baby's not sleeping? Call Anna from Sleepmaker. Like, there's no shame in that game because everyone wants sleep. And a lot of people who have to go back to work early can't afford to make mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's removing the shame from all of it. And the other group of people I wanted to chat to you about is there's definitely a group who maybe have started off just completely as single mums and they're going that parent journey all by themselves, or the relationship has broken down within a few weeks of the baby being born. And sometimes I have mums come in, they're obviously exhausted, they don't have another person to share the load with. And we maybe have grandparents offering to take Bub overnight, or we have dad offering to take the baby to another house.
Yep.
And there can be all these sort of emotions around that. Do you have any advice in those situations?
Wow, it's hard, right? I'm a real softie for that. So it's just, I do. Unfortunately, I do get families like that where, shit just happens, right? And I think just getting yourself support, whether it's, if you can't have us come to your house, jump on a Zoom with us or talk to somebody, whether it's getting online and reading, because there are books out there that can help you, right? But as soon as you are sleeping and your baby is sleeping, you can kind of conquer those big issues because they just keep adding up and adding up and adding up. I always say to parents, like, if you are a single parent and you have grandparents, get the grandparents to help out during the day, right? The chances of them falling asleep behind the wheel or tripping are really high if they're doing all the work at night. And I see it a lot. Like I've done a handover with grandparents that, were looking after twins, and they didn't realize until 3 weeks of them doing night care how much it was affecting their sleep. And so if you can do the hard yard at night and you can start putting these methods into place, and, normally, like I said, by 3.5 to 4 months, get a routine. Because when your baby is sleeping, when you can kind of work around it. Because it's sometimes just not practical for me to say, look, you sleep when your baby sleeps, right? Because I know there's all these TikToks of like mom sleeping on the side of the road, or, the baby's sleeping at like the mall. And so they're sleeping at the mall. So it's not practical, right? So I think if you do get help, really decide what hours are important to you. Because if you're getting your parents help and they're sleep deprived, it's just a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good point, actually. And in terms of, do you think there's a reasonable age for it? So if we've got parents living in different houses, do you think there's a reasonable age for a baby to be able to go and sleep between two houses? Like, do you have an idea or thoughts
like
on that?
If the family is split?
Yeah.
Look,
So,
that's a difficult question because, you don't know if the baby's breastfeeding. Right? And it would just be, I couldn't imagine having my child taken away at 6 months, right? Because it's that bond, right? So look, sometimes divorces are very, very messy. And, but I think at the end of the day, it's seeing what's best for the baby, what's best for the child. I don't even know how to answer that question, to be honest.
it's very difficult. It's definitely something that comes up in my consultations. It's not super frequent, but it's come up.
I recently had to write a paper on like a mom traveling with a baby, and if it was okay, and absolutely, if you have a baby and you want to travel with a baby, that's great, traveling at a young age. But when it comes to traveling between parents, it's hard because if you have one parent that has really positive sleep hygiene and knows how to follow a routine, and then you've got another parent that doesn't, that does get a bit messy because then it feels like all your hard work is not working. So I think it just depends on the situation. I mean, I think with you, like, I guess sitting them both down in the same room and being like, this is what we're going to do at both sides, but how do you monitor that?
Yeah.
Like, that would be hard.
It's really challenging. I think not even sleep, whenever you've got separated families or people even within the same family who've got very different ideas. So sometimes I find whenever, people have a newborn in the house, it can bring out conflict because mum might think this and that's what their family do, and dad might think this, and there might be grandparents putting their 10 cents worth.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I this is really funny because sometimes I think that my parents are like, so what do you do for work now? Like, you let a baby cry it out? I'm like, no, mom. Because like back in their generation, it was very different, right? But I mean, I don't advertise this that often, but we get a lot of teen moms that come through Sleep Baker. And I'm so grateful. So how it works is a client has been through Sleep Baker and they met someone that's a teen mom and they send them to Sleep Baker. So we set them up with, if we've got it at the moment, we'll give them a cot and just teaching them, what to expect, right? And it's really, really nice because most of the time it's after they've had their baby, they come to us. And it's nice that we can actually help them. So we normally, it's a very broken family, right? We're not really going to the house, but they're coming to the clinic. They're picking up baby clothes. A lot of clients know who've been to the program that we do offer stuff for teen moms, so they'll drop off donations.
And whenever people come to visit you at the clinic, what would that look like?
Look, it's all things baby, right? And up to age 8. So a lot of parents feel that, when they had their first or second, they never had these options. And they're like, wow, this is so great. Like, I have one lady that she wanted to come every 4 weeks just to check in. And I was like, well, you don't really need me. Like, you're doing great. She's like, no, I feel like every 4 weeks I'm going to have more questions. So she used to just come in. She gets an hour appointment. We can talk about anything from breastfeeding to night settling to if you have multiples. I mean, I've had clients that have had triplets. So I mean, that's a different ballgame, right? So it can be anything child related, and I go up to age 8. So sometimes I do get children who are on the spectrum, and it's about helping parents through it because it's really, really difficult. And, when you get a child who's 7 years old that doesn't know how to self-settle, there's a lot of other things that go along with it. So I'll be like, okay, can she go to bed at night on her own? No. How does she go with school drop-off? They're like, that's so interesting. When she gets out of the car, I have to then walk her to school. I was like, well, yeah, because the good habits start by independently sleeping.
So, Anna, lots of our listeners live all around the world, so not all of them are going to be able to have you come to their house. So let's think about this family who have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and mum's sleeping with one and dad's sleeping with the other one, and, their relationship's kind of going down the toilet, and they're also exhausted, and the kids are exhausted because they're not getting enough sleep.
Yep.
Can you give me a couple of pointers that our listeners could do even if they never actually get to meet you?
Both parties have to be on board, right? Mom and dad have to be there. And I'm very honest. I'm like, you're going to fight. It's completely normal. And it's their, these two people are like, okay, they're ready for it. What's going to get worse? The dad's like, I'm ready for anything. And they sit there and you ask them questions. And at first it's kind of, rainbows and butterflies. Oh yeah, we've tried that. I'm like, what about this? What about that? No. And then it's all of a sudden like, well, no, you did that yesterday. No, I saw you do this, right? That's what I want. I want that honesty because we can't meet in the middle until both parties can agree that something has to change. So it's about open communication. It's about, once you decide to do this, you can't stop. So if you're the stronger parent, you're going to be the one that are going to be starting to set the boundaries for those children. Because if you fall apart after 5 minutes, chances are you and your husband are going to start fighting. One's going to leave the house and one's going to be crying on the couch.
So if you have a 3-year-old who you're having to lie beside every night, would your advice be that you lie with them for 5 minutes and then you remove yourself from the room?
I am all about ripping the Band-Aid off.
Okay.
Right? So I do find that if you've been laying with them for 45 minutes and then you're saying to me, Anna, do you think I should lay with them for 5 minutes? No, because that's confusing. And they are going to pull on your heartstrings. And the chances of you leaving in 5 minutes, I could place a bet that that's not going to happen. Right? So I say to parents, let's start something new. It's all about, so if I get a child who's 3 over, they know that something's going to change. They'll be like, look, Anna from Sleep Baker's coming out. And the first day, they're really excited for a change, right? They can't wait for me to arrive. And then I get there And they like me up until bedtime because I've started these new rules and these new boundaries. It's not about being mean. I actually want the child to like me, but because, you're telling them to do something that they're not going to like, it does take them a while to trust you. And so I say to the parents, whether you're doing it or I'm doing it, maybe read stories on the couch. Don't do things in the bedroom, because as soon as it's time to leave, like I said, they'll pull on your heartstrings, and then you'll feel emotional about it and you won't want to leave. They start crying. So I had a family with twins, and I would say to them, read them books on the couch. Don't make the room purely that when you go in there, it's going to be a really quick handover. Okay, remember I said at bedtime, we're going to read books on the couch. We're going to walk into the bedroom. I'm going to give you a hug and a kiss. I'm going to tuck you in, and I'll see you in the morning. And then you leave the room, right? And you can say to them, I'll be back. I'm just going to go do the laundry and come back. I always say to parents, don't say I'm going to come back in 2 minutes, because if you have a 7-year-old that's going to be sitting looking at that time, they're just waiting for that time. So let them know that you're in the room. Okay, I'm just going to step outside. I'm going to go put the laundry in the dryer and I'll be back. Or I'm going to go empty the dishwasher and I'll be back. Make noise, right? Let the child know that you are out. Don't sneak around. Don't, eventually I say to close the door. But for the time being, the biggest thing you can do is leave that room. But go back and check on them, just like we do as babies. This is the misconception behind controlled crying, is even though we leave the room and they're in there for 30 seconds to a minute by themselves, we're still going back. We're still letting them know, wow, you've done really, really well. And I think a lot of parents who have older children want a result that day, but it takes practice. It's like, I said to this mom, I remember I went on this juicing diet, right? And the first day is the hardest. The second day is even worse, because you know that you're going to wake up and be on juice. But then the third day, you're like, oh, my body has just adjusted. Same with kids. The first day, they're a bit unsure. You kind of get through it. The second day, you're like, oh my God, this is so hard. And you want to stop and revert back to your ways. But then you get to day 3, you're like, wow, I've seen a change. Keep going. Not that I want to compare to juice, but you know what I mean?
That's great.
It's like a fab diet, but it's just, you got it. So when I say rip the Band-Aid off, if the chances of you going into that room, reading a book, you're down on their level, they'll be like, Mommy, please don't leave 5 more minutes. And you're like, okay. But you know what? Okay, Tommy, time to go to bed. I'm going to come back and check on you. Okay. That's the best thing. And you know what? You might be in and out of that room 60 times. I would prefer you in and out of that room 60 times than you laying with him until he falls asleep. And if little Tommy decides to go for a run, well, you put your joggers on, because you're going to run and get him and you're going to bring him back to bed. Okay, let's try this again, right? So that is my statement of ripping the Band-Aid off.
I love that. So Tommy has finally fallen asleep.
Yep.
And it's now 2 a.m. and you feel the little tap.
Yep.
Or you just feel little Tommy climbing over you and climbing into the bed. What do we do then? Do we say, oh, well, he did well to get to 2. We'll decide him get into bed with us? Or are you just saying,
sometimes you don't even know little Tommy's gotten into bed because they're so quiet, right? Look, that is a time where if you do notice that he is awake and in your bed, oh, good job on sleeping in your bed. Less talking is best. You don't want to have a full-blown conversation, because they get hungry, they need water, they want their iPad, they want to watch TV, right? Pick them up, bring them back to their bed, put them in it. I'll be right back to check on you. And you do the same thing. And you might do that 60 times. It might take you an hour and a half. That is the hard work that I'm talking about. And that is where people crack. So when clients say to me, oh my gosh, look, I'll just do it myself. I'm all about them trying. I will give you I'll give you support where I can, but you have to be ready for it. And that's where it goes with parents. You want to be on the same page, because if dad is doing it and mom isn't, and she's a bit of a weak link, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's so important to be on the same page and work as a team, because you want that child to know whether they go to mom or they go to dad, they're going to have the same outcome. The results are going to be the same. Well, dad lets me get away with this. And I love it when the dads will be like, oh yeah, well, I work all day, so I feel really, really bad, which absolutely you are going to feel that way. But then when they're on the same page and the kids are like looking around like, what's going on here? You're going to have quicker results.
Yeah, they're looking for the weakest link.
Yeah, but you know what? Don't kid yourself, because I always say this to families. I go there, I do the first 3 nights, right? It's getting rid of bottles, it's getting rid of dummies, it's teaching an older child to stay in your bed. But you still have this 2-week window that you have to do all of the hard work as well. So don't kid yourself. You're still going to be on this emotional roller coaster, because what happens if you change one little thing, they are going to find a loophole to be better and to get out of that room, right? So I had a dad, he's so beautiful. He rang me up because he wasn't sleeping. He was having issues at work. And Yep. So he thought after the 2 weeks the little boy was doing great, that then he could start sitting in bed with him. So then I had to go back out to remind him and to show him, okay, you give him a little inch, he's going to take the lot, right? And so he realized really quickly, oh, I can't do that anymore. But he also didn't have the confidence to tell him. So I had to go back and be like, okay, Dad's going to leave the room. You're going to go to sleep on your own. So when he is sleeping, don't change anything. Don't change anything. You know, you've got this 2-week window with Sleep Baker that if you do book in it and something happens, reach out to us. Don't try to get online and solve it. Like, we've done that for you. That's what you're paying for.
Yeah.
We're giving you advice that we have done for years rather than you trialing and erroring, because, you know, when you called us today, you wanted these issues fixed last week. And that's the majority of clients that call.
This is amazing. I'm wanting to jump back a little bit to the baby or whoever's still in a nappy or a diaper. What are your thoughts on the baby's asleep, it's sleeping really quite well, but you go into the room and you're kind of like, I can maybe smell a wet or a dirty nappy. What do you think? Do you think take the chance to try and change it before you go to sleep?
Do you have like an age on this? Like, are you thinking newborn?
Or I'm thinking like maybe like an 8 or 9 month old.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
You can do like massive wheeze.
Yeah, look, I change your baby.
Yeah.
Right there. Like, I do find that, like, I had a baby that did a poo at 5 a.m. but went back to sleep. And then mom was like, I had left at that point. She's like, what do I do? I was like, well, does he have a nappy rash? No. Has he leaked through? No. She just left him. Right now, that's not ideal. I don't want to say to my parents, never change your child. But because you had 45 minutes before we were getting up, we were sleep training, that's kind of a different situation. So I would say leave it. But, you know, between like 0 to 12 months, you are going to be changing. It's going to be depending on where you are with your child, right? So if you're constantly feeding your baby at night, you are going to have to change the baby more often, right? And that is where, when somebody said to me, Anna, why don't you write a book? I was thinking, are people really going to want to read it? I want a practical solution to go that's going to collaborate with Sleep Baker. And that's where my dream vision came in with Dream with Baker, with my baby clothing line.
I'm excited to see this. Show me.
I'm so excited. Because look, it is one of those things, like when I tell people about it, they're like, so it changes the nappy on its own? I'm like, no, it's better than that, right? So as you know, having kids, it's one of those things where what would be your biggest fear at night changing a nappy?
That I'm going to wake them up.
That's exactly right. And if you have spent 45 minutes trying to settle your baby and they finally have gone to sleep, and then you hear that, oh, they've messied their pants, you are going to start sweating thinking, oh my God, I just took 45 minutes trying to get them to sleep. So I want a solution that helped all babies and actually even parents. So that's where I decided to launch Dream with Baker.
I'm so old that also all my children had baby grows that had poppers. So there was all those poppers to do. I know they know I have zips and things.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, a really interesting story on this baby, on my dream line was, I had a baby during COVID. So I've had this vision in my head for years. But as you know, like, it's expensive to launch a business. Is it going to work? All these legal things you have to pay for, the pains, it's so expensive. And I had a baby that I had from maternity leave. Mom came home from hospital. He had a heart condition. And I remember thinking, gosh, this little baby is going to have heart surgery. And what are we going to do because of the cords and tubes? So when he came home and the mom sent me a photo of him, I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, Anna, I have had this in the back of my mind for 10 years. I'm going to do this for this little baby, Ollie. And I remember he came home from the hospital on I think it was a Wednesday. And by Sunday, I had the manufacturer picked out. I had all the designs done because they were all designed in Australia. But it was what I needed to be like, right, let's get this going. Because I wanted something that all babies could benefit, whether you're hooked up to cords and tubes, whether you're happy and healthy. So that's kind of where this vision came. And so basically, yes, there are snaps. And I decided to do snaps and not zippers here because if you do have a feeding tube or you are hooked up to machines at the hospital or you are premature, this will benefit you. Right. So I wanted some snaps here, and this is all organic fabric. But the great thing of my favorite is this beautiful pouch. And when I say my favorite, it's because it takes, on average 5 minutes to change a nappy. But with this, you can do it with dimmed lights. I mean, I've got dads that'll be like, ooh, I can do it with no lights at all because they're so used to it now, right? But this pouch is you pull their legs out, you change their nappy, and you flip them back through.
Oh, and I love the design.
So,
I love the
yeah. So it's my greatest masterpiece.
It's amazing. I love it. Oh, I would love this for my baby.
Yeah. And look, it was one of those things. I just wanted something organic. I wanted something that all babies could benefit from.
So is this cotton or?
Yes, that's 100% organic cotton.
Oh, it's divine. Look at the little koalas.
Yeah. And I remember I was kind of unsure if I wanted to do it. Like I said, like I'm a single parent of 2 kids, right? So I didn't really know. And I ended up doing some work for Dr. Shauna Pittman. And I remember when I showed her this for the first time, it was kind of like, where has this been? And her face, I remember it like, what are you doing? Like I said, oh no, it's in production now. Like, what are your thoughts on it? She's like, I love it. I love it. And then her twins were wearing them. So she was a person as well. Like I've had all these people play such a significant role in my life that she was like, do it, just do it. So it was so nice to have that support from her. And then I did my first round and everybody said white. And to be honest, it didn't sell. And I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong because I'm like, man, I did all these postings on social media and everybody loved it. Well, the thing that I went wrong on is, I'm not a marketing director, so I didn't really know how to use socials, but I was doing it all wrong because even though I had pictures of babies in it, it wasn't showing what it could actually do, right? So then I ended up deciding, okay, I'm going to do other colors. And so I went back on, I hired a fantastic social media person. And we started doing colors, and then it just started selling because I was showing people the benefits to it, right? So if you have a premature baby and they're in hospital and you want them to wear clothes, they can still wear these because the cords and tubes can go through. If you go home and you have a baby that's reflux and you don't want to bopping them around, you've just fed them, oh my gosh, you don't want to lay them down for 20 minutes, and you want to do a quick nappy change, you can do that so quickly that the chances of them waking up after you get better at changing them are less. So I wanted something because people are like, oh, how can you change a nappy in like less than 5 minutes? Like, bring it, daddy. So I had a client in the US that called us up one day and said, I bought these pajamas because I saw that we were on Channel 7. And they said, now my husband does the majority of nappy changes because it's easier to do a nappy change than it was to warm up the bottle. So I thought, geez, that's a whole different marketing perk right there, right? So obviously I'm doing something right. But look, I love it. We're adding new color. I want them to be comfortable. I want it to be quick, but I want it where parents are going to benefit from this as much as babies. And that is where, like I said, when I saw this little baby Ollie in hospital, that was like it for me. I was like, I'm going to do it. And it was a bit of a slow burn because I thought, man, I spent all this money. And then as soon as I had social media, I could show people, like I would hold it up and I would show them like the legs come out here and you can do this and that. It was just a game changer.
I have to say, I'm so impressed. I absolutely love it. I will be gifting this from now on to anyone who has a baby. I think it's such a brilliant idea.
Our marketing team have come up with some really amazing designs that are going to come out in January. So, and along with swaddle bags. So if you want a good night's sleep, here you go. Dream with Baker.
Yeah, I love it. And so have you patented your design?
Yes, it's all done and dusted, all ready to go. Yeah.
So no one can copy?
Nobody can copy it. No.
Yeah,
so I think that for me, this was better finding a solution for parents than for me writing a book, because I feel like there are lots of great books out there and I wanted something different. So I'm all about being bold. So
yeah, I love it. Yeah, I absolutely love that. So I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Anna and finding the information helpful. As promised, Anna has kindly shared some discount codes, especially for my listeners. Head to www.dreamwithbaker.com.au to discover her baby clothing range and use the code WATTS, WATTS, at checkout for 20% off. You can also visit sleepbaker.com and use the same code WATTS for 10% off all sleep consultations. So let's get back into it. Is there anything that you wish parents knew, that you just a mistake or something that you think people think that's maybe not quite right and that you find yourself repeatedly telling parents over and over again that you could share with us?
I guess let's talk about reflux, right? Because there are so many things I didn't even know that you could buy. I mean, there are certain bottles that I love, right, when it comes to reflux, but your baby does not need to be tilted up, sitting in a special machine for the rest of the night to be able to sleep, right? And that's one thing that I think parents will be like, oh, the doctor diagnosed my baby with reflux, so I went out and I bought this contraption and I'm doing this, and this. And I feel like that is on repeat for me. Oh my gosh, why are you doing all that? Well, I don't know, but it's really expensive and I've had to buy this and that and this. I was like, oh no, because reflux has been around for years, right? So again, this is where my practical solution comes in. Don't go out and buy anything. Just be practical. So I say to parents, yes, it's real. Some babies have it worse than others. Some babies will scream. I mean, I've had a baby that just screams all night long, and it's mind blowing. Parents are like, "Oh no, you get through it." You do, but it's.
I can. All four of my children had reflux, but my first child, it was horrific.
Yeah, and it's like you don't even have to be vomiting. To be diagnosed. It can be silent, right? So I find a good bottle. Do some research on a bottle. Don't be afraid to use a dummy. So I'll get parents, I'll be like, oh no, I'm not using a dummy. But I'm like, you've just paid $400 for this machine to put your baby in, but it's a supervised baby bed, right? Where when you're desperate, parents will do anything. So I don't necessarily think they're supervising their baby at night in this bed, right? So I say to them, feed the baby, take breaks, burp. And the biggest thing I see is I'll come over to a house, and they're, picture us standing in the living room and the baby's crying and they're bouncing the baby up and down. Oh my God, they just had a feed. Could you imagine the pain that baby's going through with milk flying up and down? So don't bounce your baby. And that's something that they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. So if you're sitting in a chair, you're standing, just burp your baby. Keep them up for 20 to 30 minutes. And it seems like a long time, but it's better to let that milk settle. And then when they are laying down, offer them a dummy if they can't settle. Don't be afraid to offer a dummy, right? And again, it's laying them flat on their back. We don't need 25 phone books to prop them up. They don't need to be co-sleeping with you because you're afraid of their pain. But I do find a large amount of babies that have reflux do have bad habits. And it's nothing to ever point the finger at a parent, because they are doing everything that they can do to get through that. Because if you've never had a baby with reflux, the cry is so real, and you will do anything to get rid of that cry.
So 2 things that I find parents do a lot, and I know that I did this as well, is that I see parents frequently changing formula.
Yes. Yep.
Like, to me, way too frequently.
Yep.
They go, baby sun's up, we're going to try a different one, we're going to try a different one, we're going to move to the goats one, now we're going to go to the soy one.
Oh, I see that as well.
And we're just moving all the time. And the other thing I see parents doing is buying multiple different types of bottles. And again, I will openly admit that I did this with my first son as well. So, really, is that a mistake to keep swapping? My gut feeling.
Well, this is where I hate pointing the finger, right? I hate, but it is a mistake. So I think that you have to realize that if your baby is lactose intolerant, obviously go to a formula that's going to work. But if you start a formula, stay on it for a few weeks. Chopping and changing, it's going to cause constipation. There's other things that baby's going to go through, and then it's actually not even reflux that they're suffering from. They're actually suffering from their stomach has changed so many times that you just don't want to do that to them, right? So find a formula that works for them. Find a good bottle. Look, I'm not going to advertise Pigeon, but I love a good Pigeon bottle. I just find that they do get quite tight and sealed. And I was with a client one day that had this bottle that she said to me, have you ever used this bottle brand before? And I was like, no, I've heard of it. Basically, there was a spoon and a straw and a cleaner, and she came in, and it took me like 15 minutes to try to get the thing together, and you couldn't shake the bottle. You had to stir it. Well, I was feeling like, God, this is better than the amount of time I spent on having a cappuccino, right? And then they had this huge machine that they were sterilizing this special bottle for. And I just remember, I thought, okay, I never want to overstep a parent, right? If you come to me and you're like, look, Anna, I've never done this before, or I've had 2 and I want to do something differently, I am all about giving you my ideas. But I just thought this was just so weird. I just feel quite sorry for them. But again, the next day that I went in, I found this bottle, Pigeon, that was like reflux. And I just set it on the table. And then the next day I realized that when I went there was like 15 bottles for them, and they were shaking their bottles. That's where, if you are spending 20 minutes at night getting all these bottles ready, like shaking and not stirring, fluffing, it's just, you're just messing about, and that's exhausting to do that 5 times a day.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That is where I want to take away the pain and all the research for parents. Just come to us or find a sleep consultant that's going to help you. Get rid of the trial and errors. Let us just do it for you.
Yeah.
We've done this so many times over and over and over, and I love it. And again, I'm all about, there's all these new baby things, right, to make your life simpler. And there's a real issue with, what is it called? The snoo.
Oh,
have you heard of the snoo?
no.
I love it. And I do know that a lot of consultants don't like it because they're like, well, the baby gets so used to you sleeping. It is magnificent, right? My kids were great sleepers, so I never needed it, but I didn't even think they had it then. But it's this bed that you put your baby in, you put them inside of these, like a contraption, and you zip them up. It has Velcro. When the baby cries, they move back and forth, and it goes faster and faster. And then eventually it turns off if your baby's like absolutely, crying, and you go and help them back to sleep. But I said to some parents, don't have the luxury of having somebody come into their house at night. So if you have to have a bassinet that's going to move them, well, they're going to only be in there for about 4 months, and then you put them into a cot. So even if a baby goes from a bassinet to a cot, they're still going to have to go through some sort of sleep training for a new area. But if you have a parent that's not sleeping, that can't afford in-home care at night, and they have to get a bassinet and it's working, why bother it? Do you know what? So I remember somebody saying to me, what are your thoughts on this? A lot of people were saying they get used to that habit. Of course, if they are sleeping for 4 months off movement and then you have to transfer them to a cot, you're going to have 3 rough nights, but at least you got 4 months of great sleep. So I'm all about it. So yes, on that kind of thing, I do love, something that's going to make your life easier. But yeah, when it comes to, people will say, do I need this, that? Nope, just get yourself a dark room, a good white noise, find yourself some sleep maker pajamas, you want to make life as simple as possible.
Awesome. And I absolutely love all your very practical and very supportive thinking around this subject. I'm going to ask you one final question, which is, if you could talk to 20-something Anna, what would you say to her?
That's a really, really good question. I sometimes wish, because I really wanted to be a mom so bad. It's kind of like all that I knew, right? So my kids are now 13 and almost 10. And I feel like I've had my kids, but I've worked. I feel, how do I say this? I feel quite bad because I had my kids. I went back to work because I was a single parent, very young. And I always kind of beat myself up thinking, oh my gosh, I should have done this. And I look at all these Pinterest parties that people are hosting, and I was like, oh, I wish my Instagram was better. You feel the blame for all this stuff. And then I realize now, no, my kids need me more than ever now. My 13-year-old doesn't want me missing a soccer game. He doesn't care if I missed a night of sleep, if I had somebody helping at night, because my kids were great sleepers. I was so lucky that both my kids slept through the night. But now,
probably you trained very well, right? To be fair.
It's all that I know, right? So now I had this blame for years when I was young, because I had Luca when I was 22, 23, and I just feel so bad. Not that he missed out on anything, because it's not about missing out, but I now know, like, oh, actually, when I go traveling, I know that before I go traveling on any jobs, I need to make sure that I'm there for this, 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 and this. And then I got back from traveling recently, and now it's all hands on deck with my kids, because they tell me everything. And it's truly beautiful, because all these years I felt like I missed out on so many things, but it's actually now that a child, they're the ones that they want you to go to their school functions. They want you to drive around like mama taxi. So yeah, I think looking back, I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I can't even imagine what it's like now for people, because social media wasn't that big, 13. I mean, it was big, but I guess I wasn't on it that often, whereas I am now, and I'm looking at things and people are comparing different lifestyles, and thank goodness I'm more present, because I'm able to be, because of my business. I'm able to be a better parent and, help them through like their challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I feel exactly the same way. When I started this podcast back in December 23, I knew that I was lucky enough to have amazing conversations with various health professionals across all facets of medicine and allied health. And I knew that you would probably really enjoy being a fly on the wall to hear what we talked about. And that's how the podcast was born. And what you probably don't know is that this is a bit of a passion project. We don't have any sponsors or funding. And without your help, we won't be able to continue bringing you these great guests. So if you can please spread the word about the podcast, Share it with someone who you think might benefit from the conversation that you've just listened to, or if you can leave us a review or a comment, it would mean the absolute world, because that actually helps the podcast spread further and get more people to hear our message and hopefully allow us to invite bigger and bigger guests onto the show. And I would so appreciate you helping me back. Thank you. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.